So let's all settle in. Settle into your seat. Everybody, please mute yourselves. So finish your last sip of tea or coffee or whatever it is, juice, and settle into your seat. Allowing your body and your heart and your mind to relax and settle. And we'll sit for 45 minutes this morning. We increased it by 5 minutes last week, and there wasn't too much restlessness for the last 5 minutes, I noticed. So we'll sit for 45 minutes again. And we've explored 4 of the 7 factors of awakening so far. And we'll engage those factors in our meditation this morning. As you settle into your seat, bringing mindfulness to the whole body sitting posture. Keeping it simple. Feeling the contact points. And bringing in a little bit of investigation. Is there pressure? Is there a temperature? Maybe some heaviness in the body, lightness in the body. Sensations of touching, maybe softness or hardness. And when the breath appears in your field of mindful presence, then turning your mindful attention directly into the sensorial experience of breath, wherever it's most clearly and directly felt for you in your body. Maybe it's in the belly, the movement of the breath in the belly, rising movement of the belly, the falling movement of the belly. Maybe it's in the nostril and upper lip area, the sensations of an in-breath at that place, and the sensations of an out-breath in that area. And again, making an effort gently to bring some investigation into the experience, the sensorial experience of an in-breath and an out-breath. Not making anything up, not getting involved in a story about the breath, just the direct, immediate experience as it is. How is it? We don't have to wait for energy to arise in order to make an effort, in order to make an effort towards being mindful and investigating. Making an effort brings energy, which is the next factor. Mindful awareness of the quality of the energy that's showing up through making an effort. Not over efforting and not lethargic energy efforting. Noticing to bring the energy and the effort into balance. Mindfulness notices, and investigation makes things clear. One inhalation, one exhalation. This amazing breath that we breathe. This amazing breath, the breath of life, being breathed by this. And sharing this breath with all living forms on this planet. How truly amazing, really. And maybe with that reflection and the mindful connection with an investigative flavor to an in-breath and an out-breath, some joy arises, a sense of a lightness of being. A quiet joy. Here I am in this moment. An in-breath, however it is, knowing this. An out-breath, however it is showing up, knowing this. This great, great gift of our practice. Bringing us to the immediacy of present moment experience. not getting caught up in the thought forms, stories, or images. Just simply bringing a mindful attention to, oh, thinking, an image, not being seduced into these stories, this pondering, this wandering mind, but recognizing it when it shows up and recognizing without judgment, without any self-condemnation. Various other sensations in the body make themselves known. Mindful connection, knowing them just as they are, knowing them as they change, move, dissolve, disappear, reappear. Not trying to make anything happen or fix anything. Checking the energy again. How is it? Noticing the taste of the joy factor if it's showing up in some way. Not identifying with it, not trying to keep it, hold it, accepting it, receiving it, letting it be as it is and as it goes and disappears. Alive in our practice today. Alive with mindful presence. An investigative flavor into our experience, however it is. Making an effort which brings the energy. The whole system waking up, becoming more alive. This is our practice. remembering to return home to the breath, the sensations of an in-breath, the sensations of an out-breath. Receiving. Remembering to just simply begin again and again and again. If you're looking at a clock or your watch, recognize impatience. Allow the heart, mind, and body to relax and simply make the effort to begin again. One in breath, one out breath. Just this. Nothing to do. Nowhere to go. A receptive, mindful presence. Body, heart, and mind. mindful awareness if the experience of calm, a sense of ease in the body, heart, and mind is showing up. Calm, ease, tranquility. And just simply notice without clinging, without attachment. Not trying to get to calm, but noticing if it's arising. Just this. Just mindful presence. For the last few moments of our practice, allowing mindful attention to return home to the breath, the sensations of an in-breath, the sensations of an out-breath, however it's breathing itself in through your body. May all of the wholesome energies and the fruits that manifest through our practice serve with immeasurable impartiality, without bias, without prejudice, towards the welfare, the happiness, and the awakening of all beings everywhere, which of course includes ourselves. So it's time for some walking practice, 10 minutes of walking meditation or stretching, mindful stretching meditation, which you can do sitting in your chair, moving around as you wish. But do move your body and stay mindful. And I will ring the bell in 10 minutes for us to come back together again. And so, as usual on our Sunday Sangha gatherings, I will offer some Dhamma reflection. So, settling into your seat, relaxing the body, heart, and mind. And opening the ear doors, receiving sound. It's by the strength of our own mindful attention and awareness that is fueled by great interest and energy, taking the time to look deeply at our own experience of body, mind, and heart, and taking the time to develop a concentrated clarity of awareness. It's through all of this that we're able to experience, to see, and to know the nature of things, to know the truth. And certainly, most all of us here have had at least some tiny taste of this, and maybe some big tastes of it. This is what brings the deepest ease and contentment. This is what brings the deepest happiness. This is what liberates the heart, what liberates the mind. Out of his own experience and brilliance, the Buddha offered us our deepest and most expansive human possibility. And something I've mentioned, I think I've mentioned previously in one of our Sunday Sangha meetings, that one of my Burmese teachers, Sayadaw U Pandita, said that I love and that inspired me every single time I heard it. He said, this practice is about becoming a real human being. This practice is about becoming a real human being. The Buddha, out of his great brilliance of mind and his compassionate heart, offered us the tools and the map, offered us the necessary ingredients and the recipe that he himself discovered along the way of his journey. It's a map, it's a recipe that I've come to trust implicitly, perfectly, as I'm sure some of you have also. And there are a number of trails, so to say, that are part of this whole network that the Buddha laid out in his map. A number of ingredients and seasonings that he listed in his recipe. When I was first considering what I would like to explore for a series of online teachings and practices with you all, what stood out for me, and one of the things I was most moved to share based on my own journey along this path, based on my own cooking along, or more accurately, being cooked in the midst of this recipe, was the very clear, very basic map, the very basic and necessary ingredients that the Buddha spoke about many, many times over his 45 years of teaching. The 7 factors of enlightenment, the 7 factors of awakening. If our goal in practice is to be liberated from suffering, to awaken from the sleep, from the illusion in our deluded relationship to samsara, we must carefully and wisely cultivate, develop, fulfill, and perfect each of these 7 factors of awakening. We could say that these are our tools for traversing the map. And at the same time, they're also the map itself. The map and the tools are intrinsic to each other. The recipe and the ingredients are inherent within each other. With today's Dhamma reflection, we'll continue to touch into this map, these tools, touching into the ingredient of tranquility. Tranquility, the 5th factor of awakening, the 5th factor of enlightenment. And it's the first of the 3 cooling or restraining or calming factors of these 7 factors of awakening. And so just a few, or just a brief, I should say, review of the factors that we've already looked into, which you reviewed for yourself, we could say, during our 45-minute sit. So beginning with mindfulness, the great mother of our practice, if you will, the great mother, or as the Buddha called it, the chief. I sometimes think of it as a female and male way, the mother and the chief way of saying it. And why is it the mother? Why is it the chief? Because it's necessary and absolutely useful everywhere, all the time. The ground of our practice of awakening is attending carefully and wisely, attending mindfully to an object that's arisen in one of the 4 foundations or one of the 4 domains of mindfulness. With these 4 domains covering every single aspect of our human experience in the body, mind, and heart. As a factor of awakening, quickly following and intimately connected with our mindful attention to an object comes the 2nd factor, investigation, discernment of states of body, mind, and heart, which then in turn perks up our interest, which in its turn fires up effort and energy in a more ongoing way. And the 3rd factor of awakening is aroused, effort, energy. As we begin to know how it is more and more clearly and more often through our mindfulness and investigation, our interest in seeing and knowing sustains and inspires the effort that's needed for our practice. And what happens? Our energy begins to open up, increase, and flow more and more freely. And we begin to feel a kind of delight, a gladness, joy, rapture, piti in Pali. This lightness of being that I mentioned last week. And the 4th factor of enlightenment, joy, sometimes called the happiness factor, is born. Although the core teachings of the Buddha emphasize the everywhereness and the ongoing presence of stress and unsatisfactoriness, the Pali word being dukkha, which is usually translated as suffering, in our human condition. The comprehension of stress and unsatisfactoriness actually resides in the context of a path that's infused from beginning to end with contentment and joy. Happiness plays an essential role in the development of virtue, sila, concentration, metta, all the Brahmaviharas, and insight, wisdom, in the Buddhist teachings and in the meditation practices. And as we spoke a bit about last week, profound joy comes through the simplicity that we move towards in our life as our practice deepens and unfolds, and in the clear conduct of a life lived virtuously. Also, the development of the mind, the heart mind, brings great joy and brings a deep sense of well-being as practice develops and blossoms. And with this bliss, with this joy and the knowing of it, without any grasping, without attachment, without any self-identification in those moments, such as this is mine, this is me, I am a joyful person, I am a happy person, without any of that, the body moves towards becoming calm, towards becoming more and more tranquil. The subtle bodily and mental disturbances that are connected with deep appreciation and gladness and joy and rapture, these are removed. They actually disappear with the calm and in the quiet. They disappear in the serene pleasure of tranquility. So tranquility, passaddhi in Pali, the fifth factor of awakening, the fifth factor of enlightenment, has arisen. In relationship to this, I'd like to speak just briefly regarding a comment that was mentioned during last Sunday's discussion, and that came up actually again this week in a practice meeting with another member of our Sunday Sangha. The comment was about a subtle sadness coming up when joy, delight, and happiness disappear or fade away. And I add, as a temporary conditional, joy, delight, and happiness always does. It always disappears or fades away. Sadness in these circumstances arises why? Well, it arises because there is some degree of attachment. There's some degree of identification in relationship to these experiences of joy, delight, and happiness. Recognizing this and understanding it without self-judgment and without any self-condemnation is very, very much an aspect of our practice. And this is very important so that the process of awakening is able to continue moving along unimpeded. It's not so easy, this part of the practice, but it's necessary. So what is the direct experience of this fifth awakening factor, tranquility? There can be a feeling of composure, a smoothness, a quietness, a gentleness, and a stillness within our body, heart, and mind. As this enlightenment factor develops and deepens, we find that without making any special efforts, various states that have caused consciousness to be disturbed are quieted. Distress in relationship to feelings of pleasant and unpleasant. The distress that often accompanies our perceptions of things. And distress that's related to volitional or intentional formations are all tranquilized, quieted. The movement of the mind, the heart towards or the movement away from is still. Mental and physical disturbances are cooled out, we could say. Basically, not very active or pretty inactive when the enlightenment factor of tranquility is present in us. When this experience of a very deep calm is present in us. And I'm sure that many of you have felt this, at least for a few moments at times in your practice, and maybe for longer than a few moments at times. There's very little, if any, discomfort. Because of this, tranquility is sometimes called the heart of easefulness in relationship to our practice. The Buddha spoke many, many times about two things that are conducive to liberating insight. And these two things are tranquility and insight. And so some words from the Buddha regarding this. He said, if tranquility is developed, what profit does it bring? And he goes on answering his own question, as he often did. The mind is developed. If the mind is developed, what profit does it bring? And he says, all lust is abandoned. And he goes on, if insight is developed, what profit does it bring? He responds to his own question, wisdom is developed. And he says, if wisdom is developed, what profit does it bring? And his answer to his own question is, all ignorance is abandoned. And so we dance, so to say, we dance back and forth between the development of tranquility and insight in our practice. The power of tranquility is in its capacity to provide freedom, to provide relief momentarily or for a longer period of time from feeling perturbed. Relief or freedom from agitation caused in the mind and body in relationship to the hindrances. A freedom, a relief from the agitation that comes from discursive or conceptual thinking, as well as relief from the subtleties of agitation that's related to various other states of mind. And probably, needless to say, tranquility is a place, an experience in our practice that's very easy to get attached to, right? And even possibly confused by those times when we say, this is it. This is the way it's supposed to be. This is the way I want it to be every single moment, all the time. And maybe we even think and say to ourselves, I'm finally here. Phew, I'm done. Any of you ever think that? As soon as we cling to this factor, as soon as we try to make it ours, as soon as we try to make it mine, I want, it's mine, what happens? What happens? Well, it disappears. It's gone. It goes away. The contraction of clinging, the contraction of I and mine, actually quite immediately shuts down tranquility. It shuts down the heart of easefulness, and we're on the road again to suffering. We've lost the tools and the map. We've mixed in an old, overused sour, bad tasting ingredient. What's most important at these times is to give a careful and wise attention. What's most important is to call up the chief, Mother Mindfulness, as quickly as we're able to. Seeing and knowing that there's clinging, seeing and knowing that there's identification, that there's a contraction, however subtle or however strong, in the heart, the mind, and very likely also in the body. Seeing and knowing what is. And knowing that tranquility is no longer present in us. Again, just simply knowing this through our mindful investigation without any layers of judgment, without any layers of evaluation. As a friend of mine quite aptly says, seeing is relieving. Seeing is relieving. It's been so interesting for me in my own practice when the factor of tranquility has blossomed, which of course is really quite pleasant. If the mind, if the heart just stops right there and doesn't even go to, I like this, doesn't go there, which if it did go there is often very quickly and very often inevitably followed by, I want this, or maybe even I have to have this, which are both of which, or all of which, are subtle or not so subtle contractions. And they're hard to see and hard to know. When I've been able to really be fully present and at the same time mindfully absorbed in the experience of tranquility without any self, that purity and openness is what has actually allowed tranquility to be a factor of awakening. It's completely impersonal, completely impersonal. It's a beautiful state, and it's not mine. It's not me. It's not who I am. It's really just simply one of the tools for traversing the map that leads to liberation of heart and liberation of mind. One of the ingredients of the recipe for awakening. It's one of the places that makes up the map itself, we could say. In the unfolding of the journey, tranquility creates a readiness for traversing the map to the next place. In a sense, it calls up the next ingredient needed for the mix and for the journey. And as we've looked at with each of the factors of awakening up to this point, what is the nutriment? What is the act of nourishment and sustenance to be given to the heart, the mind, for the arising development, fulfillment, and the perfection of this enlightenment factor of tranquility? The foremost nutriment for the arising and development of tranquility, as it is actually for each of the awakening factors, is giving a careful and wise attention to tranquility itself, whenever it's in the body, the heart, and the mind. Recognizing it, acknowledging it, accepting its presence, seeing and knowing it clearly. In contrast to this, not frequently giving careful and wise attention to tranquility of body, heart, and mind is what the Buddha called the de-nourishment. Meaning that this lack of attention is what prevents the unarisen factor of tranquility from arising, and what prevents or blocks the already arisen enlightenment factor of tranquility from developing. It's not about fixating on it, not at all. It's not about looking around for it, but really just very simply noticing it when it's present with the heart of acceptance, but with no clinging, no self-identification. On one level, it's very simple, really, but it's not so easy, not so easy. The other conditions that nourish the factor of tranquility are nutritious food, a congenial climate, sitting in a pleasant and at the same time an appropriately stable posture for practice, keeping to the middle, as it's sometimes called, meaning making an effort towards neutrality in relationship to phenomena. And an important nutriment for us in relationship to the way we live our life overall is a really important one about cultivating spiritual friends. Cultivating friends who are sustenance, friends who nourish this deep work of awakening. And specifically in relationship to the enlightenment factor of tranquility, there's nutriment in associating with calm people and not spending a whole lot of time with restless, very restless people. And also avoiding violent people as much as possible. And lastly, we're encouraged to make a resolve, to incline the mind, a resolve to incline the heart towards the establishment of this factor of awakening, of tranquility. As a factor of enlightenment, we know when calm is present in us. We know when tranquility is present in us. And we know when it's absent from us. And we learn eventually to know how the enlightenment factor of tranquility comes to arise and how its development comes about. When the body, heart, and mind are tranquil, the mind is then prepared for deeper concentration. Calm, quiet is for the purpose in our practice and is the most immediate cause for concentration to arise, a deeper and deeper concentration to arise. And this is the next factor of awakening, the next enlightenment factor that we'll explore during next week's mini retreat, the sixth factor, concentration, samatha in Pali or samadhi in Sanskrit. To whatever degree at this point you have confidence in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and confidence in yourself in relationship to walking this path, in relationship to traversing this map, you have somehow stepped onto the road. Good karma. And somehow are going along, taking it step by step by step. Just as it all began and then unfolded for Siddhartha Gautama throughout his life. It began at one point in its own way for each of us. And it will continue to unfold in its own way within each of us. This map is ours to learn and to traverse carefully, wisely, patiently, and with an open heart. The Buddha tells us that along the way of our practice, the function of the enlightenment factors, as they begin to develop and grow, is as a preparation for the direct unfolding of the stages of insight. When these factors are actively eliminating the afflictive states, consequently, clearly leading us towards awakening. So I'd now like to share a kind of wonderful teaching and an instruction from the elder Sariputta, who was the Buddha's chief disciple. And in this teaching and instruction, Sariputta is speaking about his own practice and his mastery over the fruition of the enlightenment factors as he speaks about his own awakening, as he speaks about his own enlightenment in this particular context. And these are his words, as far as we know. It's translated, many, many, many years ago. Friends, there are 7 factors of enlightenment. What 7? And then he goes on and he lists the 7. And then he says, whichever of these 7 factors of enlightenment I want to dwell in during the morning, I dwell in that factor of enlightenment during the morning. Whichever of these 7 factors I want to dwell in during the middle of the day, I dwell in during the middle of the day. Whichever factor I want to dwell in during the evening, I dwell in that factor of enlightenment during the evening. If, friends, it is the enlightenment factor of mindfulness, it occurs to me it's measureless. It's fully perfected. And while it persists, I understand it persists. If it abates in me, I understand it has abated in me for a particular reason. And then Sariputta goes on talking about each of the other 6 factors of awakening in this very same way. Sariputta goes on to describe his experience of the 7 factors of enlightenment as like choosing and wearing a different suit of clothes in the morning, choosing and wearing a different suit of clothes in the middle of the day, and choosing and wearing a different suit of clothes in the evening. And that's interesting because he was a monk. His different suit of clothes, every time he put on a different one, looked exactly the same as the one before. But it maybe was a different one, cleaner, fresher. The Buddha spoke about the enlightenment factors at this stage of practice as being, and these are the Buddha's words, vast, exalted, measureless, and without ill will. And he described the awakening factors as enabling a monk, enabling a nun, enabling a yogi, enabling a deep practitioner to abandon craving and to penetrate and sunder the mass of greed, hatred, and delusion never penetrated before. When this happens, when one has broken through to the Dhamma, as it's said, as it's described. The enlightenment factors become one's absolute inalienable possessions. And the yogi, the practitioner who has acquired them, has obtained the path, as it's called, obtained the path that without fail leads to liberation of heart, without fail leads to the liberation of the mind. So I'd like to close today's Dhamma reflection with some more words from the Buddha from the section of the Dhammapada called the mind. Just as an arrow maker straightens an arrow shaft, a discerning person straightens her or his mind. So fickle and unsteady, so difficult to guard and control. Like a fish out of water, cast on dry ground, throbs and quivers, this mind flops around. Hence, one should escape the realm of Mara. The mind is mercurial, ever swift, hard to restrain, alighting where it wishes. How wonderful to master this mind. A tamed mind brings happiness. Let the discerning person watch over her mind. Let the discerning person watch over his mind. So difficult to perceive, so subtle, alighting where it wishes. A watchfully protected mind brings happiness. The mind travels far, moves alone, is formless, and dwells in the cave of the heart. Those who will subdue it are liberated from the bonds of Mara. Wisdom is not perfected in one whose mind is not steadfast, in one who does not know the good teaching, and in one whose faith wavers. There is no fear for the wakeful one, whose mind is not sodden by lust, whose thoughts are undisturbed by hatred, who has gone beyond both virtue and harmful actions. Knowing the body to be as fragile as a clay pot, make the mind like a well-fortified city. Drive out Mara with the sword of insight. Then guard what you have won, remaining unattached. This body, alas, will soon lie on the ground, lifeless, abandoned like a useless piece of rotten wood. Whatever an enemy may do to an enemy, a hater or a hater to a hater, an ill-directed mind inflicts on itself even greater harm. Neither mother, father, nor any relative can do one greater good than one's own well-directed mind. And let's sit together for just a few minutes, quietly, silently. And thank you for listening to the Dhamma. And thank you for your practice.